Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. This is Property Management 101, and today I'll be reviewing with you 4 things that you and your team can't ignore to ensure that you have a successful move-in every time. The first thing you always want to make sure that you do for every move-in is you want to inspect the keys, you want to inspect the fobs, and you want to inspect any access cards or remotes you're giving to that resident that's moving in. Before any resident moves in, you should be making sure that everything that you're giving them is in full functioning order to properly work as soon as they move into that unit. You don't want to have a situation where the first impression you're giving that resident is, hey, we're giving you things that are not working correctly. You really want to make sure you're building that credibility and confidence, that relationship with that resident. And if one of the first things they experience is something is not working correctly before they even get into the unit, that is probably not the ideal start you ever want to have with a resident. The big thing to keep in mind is you really want to test the actual items you're giving to the residents. I've often seen where teams have tested the original key, and sometimes when you're making a duplicate key or you're programming them a new garage remote or a new fob, sometimes it does not work correctly. You really want to make sure you're testing these things every single time right before a move-in. And a pro tip for you today, one thing that I really recommend, I really try to enforce this with all my staff in the past, is that whoever is scheduled to be the one who's actually giving the residents the keys that day and helping them through the move-in process, they are the staff member that's actually going to go and physically check the keys or remotes and fobs themselves. Now, even if they're not the employee that actually maybe executed the lease with that resident or collected the application or did the application background or the property manager, whoever's going to be scheduled to actually perform the move-in process with that resident, they're the ones that I would strongly recommend being the one that actually should be testing the keys. The reason why for this is that this actually holds a lot of value when working with a resident, where that staff member can say to them and look them in the eye, I tested these keys and they are working correctly. This builds a lot of credibility early on rather than someone else tested the keys and I can't confirm, if they're working or I can just go by what they told me. There's definitely value when to say to that resident, these are your keys, I checked them all out and they are working 100% correctly. This is something I would strongly recommend for any property. The second thing you always want to perform before any move-in is walking the unit. Now, I would recommend when it comes to this, walking the unit at least 2 to 3 days before the scheduled move-in. The reason why is if there anything needs to be addressed, you want to make sure you're allowing your team and vendors enough time to address those and you're not walking it shortly before, like maybe within an hour before their scheduled move-in or the same day. You want at least to give 1 to 2 business days for this to occur. Now, when you're walking the unit, you just don't want to walk the unit to ensure that maybe keys are working or it's clean. You want to check all the following things to make sure they're ready for that future move-in. You do want to check it for cleanliness. You want to make sure the appliances are working correctly. You want to make sure that all windows and doors are opening and closing correctly as well as locking correctly. You want to make sure the thermostat is working correctly. You want to make sure all lighting is working. You also want to make sure the air filter was recently changed as well as the smoke detectors are there and they've had a fresh battery and put in them as well as they've been tested and are functioning correctly. I hope you're enjoying this video so far and learning something new. If so, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for future videos. And the third thing that you really want to make sure that is done and collected before you give that future resident keys is that you ensure that all lease paperwork is completed. Now, this is something you want to include the lease itself, any addendums, any other move-in paperwork that may be collected that day. Everything is signed, completed, and everything is initialed and everything is signed before that resident is moved in and you give them keys. This is going to be really important because this may be something that's hard to collect down the road because you don't have any more leverage, where if the leverage is, hey, we need to complete this before giving you the keys, the resident's obviously going to be very motivated because they do want to move in and get through that process. So it's something I would highly recommend before any resident moves in, that you double check all lease paperwork and make sure that any paperwork that day you typically collect, that is completed before issuing them the keys. And the last thing that you want to make sure you're doing and performing for every single move-in, and this is the most important step, is you want to confirm that all scheduled fees and rent have been collected. This is going to be really important because once that resident has possession of that unit, Whether it be for 1 hour or 1 year, if they owe a balance, you're going to have to file eviction for them if it gets to that point. So it's going to be really important that you ensure that all fees and all rent is collected prior to issuing them keys and then moving in. One of the things you often hear in the industry is possession is 9/10 of the law, because whoever has possession, whether it be the landlord still holding possession by holding the keys or the resident because they've moved in, they're really going to have leverage at that point. Another good practice when it comes to fees and rent is that even if the resident is 100% caught up with all their fees and all the rent that is scheduled on their move-in day, I would highly recommend going in and going over the details of their next scheduled payment or any fees or rent that is due for them. This will be important because maybe the first time they made payments is in a different format or process, as they will make payments ongoing and reoccurring long term. So it's going to be really important you explain them that process and explain them what they can expect as far as the next time any fees or rent are due. If you've not already done so, please watch my disclosure video as well as my why I do this video. And if you found this video helpful and learned something new, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for future videos. Also, if you have not connected already with our Instagram and our LinkedIn account, please make sure you do so you can see and stay up to date with industry news, video releases, and polls. If you have any questions about this video or any of my videos, feel free to comment and I'll be happy to address it for you. Happy leasing!